Come on, YouTube. There it is. Sometimes, man, like I'll start my stream and it takes its sweet time to make it like obvious that it's like, hey, yeah, we're getting your data from your software. Oh, sweet, sweet YouTube. Sweet, sweet YouTube. Oh man. Okay. So, got a topic tonight. Should be fun. People might think I'm throwing some shade, but we'll see. In the interim, what we got here? What do we need to talk about? Oh, so if you're trying to win one of the towels, don't forget you need to comment in those appropriate videos. In the video, it tells you exactly how to enter. So you just kind of have to watch the video through. They're at different spots in the videos, so it kind of encourages you to watch the whole video because the how you enter is a part of the video. That makes sense. It's feedback on the video, basically in the comments. You can probably figure it out by the number of comments that are there now. But so for the last two videos, Johnny, what? I have to watch your content. I know, right? You have to watch my content to win stuff. How dare I? But I'll be drawing all of the prizes. So there's 4 total unnumbered towels. I got some over here. Right, these guys are Danger Noodle Fishtoberfest towel that don't have the limited number on them. There's 4 of those total that are going to go out, 2 per video. And then between both videos, there's going to be the number 1 towel. So the last numbered towel that I have that isn't the one I'm keeping for myself. The number 1 towel, that'll be available as well. So there's that. And then I'm basically out of towels after that. I'll have, I think it's 1. It might be 2, but I think it's 1 left over that I'm going to save for a holiday giveaway of some form. But not necessarily Fish Fam Christmas, which I am participating in Fish Fam Christmas, but I haven't figured out how. I haven't figured out exactly what I'm doing. So we'll figure that out soon. Okay. Other things. What else can we update on? So last week I talked about how I'm gonna make some alterations to like my fish room, fish house, whatever. There's some other alterations too, but basically I'm gonna take a lot of little tanks down and put up 2 larger tanks that will basically end up being roughly the same gallonage. I go down like 2 or 3 gallons. It's not a lot, but I'm just trying to make some stuff a little easier for myself around my house right now. And also, those little tanks aren't being used for what their original design was, and I don't have the time to use them for their original design, which is raising baby fish. So, I'm gonna just change them into kind of like tanks to keep rainbows or maybe something else. I haven't decided. In the long term, until I can start like seriously putting in work toward expanding out my garage into its final form, its final fish room form, if you will. And the last thing, for those who are really astute, you might see like a random thing over here popping out of the old tanky tank, right? Yeah, my pump in my Flex 15 like finally gave up the ghost. It was making kind of a loud, not loud noise, but it was noisy. And I bet I could probably recover it if I did some monkeying around with it and like totally disassembled it. But I had to emergency, literally during a water change. Brother-in-law James was helping me, right? And I'm filling water in the tank and the pump just shut off. So I did some monkeying around with stuff and it wasn't coming back. So I was like, okay, well, good thing I keep spare sponge filters. And I got a spare whisper pump lying around that I'm not using right now. So just kind of I guess it's a lesson learned that I preach this a lot, but always have some spare equipment just in case. You know, have a backup air pump or 2, even if they're not great ones. You can get your like Tetra Whispers on sale pretty regularly for like $6, $7, right? For a Tetra Whisper 40. They're not the best pumps, right? Because they're kind of loud, but in a pinch, it's better than nothing. Maybe you want like the aquarium co-op battery backup pump, whatever it may be. Just have a couple spare things lying around just in case. Have some spare tubing, air stone, pump, sponge filter. Some filtration is better than no filtration, and water movement. That's the big thing, right? Because my tanks are all heated, so I have to have water movement, just to move that water around, keep the heat circulated, all those kind of good things. So I actually am probably going to do some at some point in the next, not this weekend. I'm pretty busy this weekend, but like probably the weekend after that, I've got to do some serious work to this thing, and I might just tear it down. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. Okay. I want to answer one quick question, and then we'll get into topic, because we've babbled enough to let people show up. So Leo's asking, how often do you clean sponges on your filters? If you mean specifically my sponge filters, it depends on the tank. I like about once a month, but there are tanks where I haven't cleaned the sponge filters in like a year because they don't have very much in them. And yeah. So I'm talking like there's some tanks that have like 1 or 2 fish in them, and they don't get fed very heavily. So part of that is just sometimes cleaning sponge filters sucks, man. Now my hang-on backs and like canisters, that's all about like monitoring flow and what's going on. So usually I have an intake sponge on most of my powered filters, and I clean those more regularly. Or like the Oase has its pre-filter. Man, that thing clogs up so quick, but it minimizes maintenance on the rest of the canister, right? So that's the good part of it. And then, I'm basically monitoring flow. As I start seeing like major drop-offs in flow, that usually means I need to clean the filter. And I try my best. I'm not perfect. By all means, I'm not perfect. But that's kind of what I target, roughly. There's no like amazing, perfect cadence. Okay, so let's get on topic for a sec. Can you trust a review from a person or company who sells the product that they're reviewing? So let me give you an example. It's super common on FishTube. We'll have people, that are like, hey, I do tech stuff and I'm reviewing this phone. But oh, silly person. It's gonna report that bad boy that's already being hidden. Some commenters, man. Some of the chat spam bots. Anyway. So in fish, most commonly, some of our best examples are going to be things that they don't necessarily produce, but maybe they do. So we could look at something like Aquarium Co-op and how they have their sponge filters, right? It's not necessarily that like they manufacture it, but it's their proprietary product that they bring in. Or KG Tropicals, right? They have their fish keeping website where they sell things like Ciche and like the tidal filters, and they have reviews on those same videos. And you can even look at something like, say, maybe Dustin's fish tanks with his fish light, right? And there's not a lot of them, but we're gonna look at some examples. And let me first talk about where it comes down to your own personal gut, but here's how we can kind of gauge things. When somebody's reviewing a product, they never talk about the negatives or things that can be improved, that's usually a big red flag. Most commonly, this happens when they're being like paid advertisements. You can think about like all your common sponsors out there where they talk about how like Raid Shadow Legends is the most amazing damn thing ever, and it's because they're literally paid to say that it's amazing, right? But that's not them selling that product necessarily, right? Whereas in the fish hobby, it's a lot different. Even like Bulk Reef Supply, right? They have their own channel and website. So I have some examples I want to use. And once you get past a couple of things, so the first thing is, do you just inherently trust the person you're talking to? So maybe it's something like KG Tropicals, where they've had their channel for a long time and only recently established a store, and they have a track history of being honest, at least as far as you're concerned, about what they're talking about with their products. And they select products to go into their store based on their own personal opinion of what good products are for the hobby. Which, in general, my personal opinion is that's what John and Lisa are doing, right? However, Geek Boy actually says, I inherently trust no one, which is good. You probably shouldn't. But as you watch certain people, you kind of get to an inherent level of trust where it's like, I know this person is, for the most part, really straight with me. Or maybe it's one of those things where you're like, I don't think I could ever trust this guy, right? You might have a feeling one way or the other. And KG Tropicals had a physical store for a while, but we have to kind of go on current iteration because a lot of their growth happened after they shut their store down, as far as the YouTube channel is concerned, and they've recently shut down their normal previous jobs to go into the fish world, right? Or you have folks like Aquarium Co-op, right? Corey's worked in a bunch of stores. He opened his own store, and now he's kind of got this behemoth of a fish business in the grand scheme of things. And he's bringing in products that he's selecting and tweaking and doing all those things to make what are kind of the normal things in the hobby a little bit better based on his experience, or at least that's how he portrays it to us. So let's say that Joe YouTuber is going to give a review on a product, the Aquaripump 9000, right? And they happen to then announce that, like, I'm also selling the Aquaripump 9000 on my new business. I want to correct. I'm going to stop myself for a moment just because of chat, because of Leo, specifically Leo. This is not a Broncos hat. That'd be a Durham Bulls hat, sir. They've had this logo for a very, very long time. Durham Bulls is a minor league baseball team. You might have heard of a movie called Bull Durham. Features the Durham Bulls. Yeah, they're very similar, right? And that's part of why I like wearing this hat, is because it tricks people. No, I'm a Seahawks fan, man. I'm not going to wear a Broncos hat. Get out of here. Anyway, we'll go back on topic. Okay? So Joe YouTuber is now pimping the Aquaripump 9000. And man, it's the best thing ever. It's better than any other filter out there. There's never a negative. Probably going to inherently go, I don't know that I should trust that. And then maybe Joe YouTuber instead is like, hey, I found this new thing. I like this, I like that. I'm not really a fan of this part of the pump, but I think it's better than the other options that are out there. And that's why I've chosen to sell the Aquaripump 9000 on my new web store, or on my web store, whatever the heck it may be, right? So that's where I think there's an inherent difference in just the way that things are projected to you, where you can kind of determine immediately whether or not it's worth trusting that opinion. Now, let's say that you do trust that opinion, but you want to be certain. This is where I'm going to use some examples. Always, always, always go wherever that thing is sold and check reviews. So I have KG Tropicals, for example, right here. We'll start with them because they're a newer store. And like, here's the title, right? We know that there's positives and negatives to the title. We can see they got 154 reviews on the title as a whole. Here's where I would care the most about things. 1, can I filter the results? Yes. Can I look at them all? Here's one of the things I would make sure you look at. Where are the negative reviews? Now, in this case, I would generally gander that their site, KG Tropicals, Keep Fish Keeping, came out after this has been well established. So most likely, the people buying this filter at this point are already fans of that filter. So maybe that's why we're not seeing negative reviews. And on some of their other products, I looked at like some of the other Sea Chase stuff. They're so new that like they have very few reviews. So that makes a lot of sense. But that would be my first warning sign. And John and Lisa, I'm not throwing any shade at you, but just that'd be my first warning sign. I see no negative reviews. Inherently, somebody's can complain about the noise the title makes when the water level gets low or some other part of the title. There are a couple small things that are not so great about the title, even though I love that filter, right? That people will be like, I should have just stuck with an aqua clear. It's a common thing that happens with that particular filter. Now let's compare this to a similar system. We'll go to Aquarium Co-op. And I'm only using these two because they're the two I know the best as bigger stores that sell various products. This is their own product, right? We can click on the reviews, it jumps us down. And immediately we can look at this and see, well, there's 23 1-stars, there's 11 2-stars, there's 26 3-stars. And we even can sort and look at like all the people who rated this thing 1 star and what they had to say. And when they were posted, this is another good thing. It tells us that there's even as recent as a couple months ago, a 1-star review. So we can probably gander in nearly 2,000 reviews at 4.8 out of 5. This actually kind of fits the bill of what's advertised, right? And you can do the same thing on Amazon or Walmart, anything that shows a lot of reviews and allows you to see this kind of breakout. Now, let me give you a bad example. And I'm not specifically going to pick on Pond Guru, but I get asked all the time about Biohome Ultimate. And his site's a little out of date. So here we are, Biohome Ultimate, right? And this would be something where if you could potentially see this as a big red flag, right? If you come down to reviews, there's no way to sort them. There's no way to see the total number of reviews, how many reviews are at any other star other than 5. All it lists is 5-star reviews. That's all you see, and there's no way to sort. You can write a review, but there's no way to determine how long it's going to be until it shows up. It's also interesting that like the top 2 are the same person. So this would be where I'd have a serious red flag. Now you can look at like Biohome Ultimate on Amazon and look at its ratings there, and maybe that's how you re-educate yourself if it's somewhere in some other third-party marketplace. But and again with like Pond Guru, if you hear him talk about Biohome Ultimate, it constantly says it's the best out there, period, right? He's incentivized to say that. He sells the product. But can we be certain that that review is 100% ultimate? Is it truly the best out there? Where's our stuff? And similar to like, you know, we look at say like the sponge filter from Co-op, Corey will give you his reasons why he discusses this. Do I think that like Pond Guru is being shady? No. You know, in general, he seems like a pretty straightforward guy. But this is one of the things that, like, this is kind of the process that I tend to go. And very often, you'll see some weird stuff on Amazon, right? Because there's just so many customers, and there are ways to bot your reviews and things like that. But the big thing is looking at verified reviews. If they have any way to show that they're a verified purchase or something like that, that's where it really matters. So these are the things that I look at when it comes to if I'm trying to assess something from somebody else. If I'm not going to assess it myself, which honestly, like I'm going to assess it myself, but this is where I would say, can you trust someone's review if they're selling that product? So if all of a sudden Bentley opens a web store and he starts selling the Fluval light and he only says positive things about it, we know that. I've said some negatives, right? we're going into fabrication land here. Never says any negatives, you should immediately be suspicious of that. But if it's like, hey, I'm going to be upfront with you. I think that this is the best bang for the buck, but here's some of the bad sides to it that aren't as good and could be improved, right? that inherently should give you a bit more credibility to what you're listening to, because they're not afraid to discuss some of the parts where that product is weak compared to other products. And maybe it's not other products, maybe it's just like, this is a bad user experience. This stupid slider bar and not being able to punch in a number is the worst thing in the world. Fluval. Right? We're going to have things like that. And in the end, it's all up to you, right? It's your gut. You got to follow your gut. When there are certain people that can tell me, this is the greatest thing since sliced bread, and I would probably lean toward going, maybe it really is that awesome. But there are other people who will talk about stuff and could say a similar thing, and I will inherently distrust them. And Jeff Koski has a great point here. Also, try to check multiple sources. If you've got 4 or 5 different people, and they hopefully are not all like employees of the same company, that are talking positively about something, it's probably a pretty decent product. But if all the people from this one company that are selling it talk positively, and then some random person, hopefully they weren't just like a scorned customer, but random person goes like, it's okay, but then you might start looking and going like, well, maybe their incentive to sell this item is forcing them to focus only on the positives and not really focusing on some of the negatives, right? These are the things that we need to be skeptical. Always be skeptical. And I've said this before, but I want to talk about this again for a reason, is because as we watch a review of anything, and I get folks contacting me constantly to review all sorts of random products. Mostly it's like Chinese made stuff on Amazon, but occasionally it's some other stuff. And I turn down a lot of it, to be honest, because most of it is I have to inherently be interested in the thing without you having contacted me first. There's actually one product that I was interested in, but I felt I was not the right person for them to work with as a company. And they were doing a lot of like substrate and cool stuff that was good for like aquascapers. I'm like, I'm not an aquascaper. I'm an idiot. I'm the worst person. You should probably try talking to some of these other small YouTubers who do a lot more aquascaping. They're going to be better for your target audience than I am. There's stuff like that, right? And that's a very rare case. I only had that once, but hopefully a lot of people are more like that. NAP Aquatics. What scraper is best for algae so I don't scrape my glass on the water box, but also comfortable to use? I don't like the Seachem one. So, 2 things. Either A, I would use, there's the non-chemically treated version of like the Magic Eraser sponges are actually really good for cleaning algae off of glass. Co-op sells some, but you can also find them on Amazon if you look. You have to make sure they're the ones without any chemicals in them. So not the actual Mr. Clean ones, but it's that type of sponge. You're going to have to get your arm in there, but those actually clean like dust algae and stuff really, really well and aren't going to hurt anything. Or 2, do I have one lying around right now? I don't have my wallet up here. Find an old credit card. Or some other like plastic card. Like if you have an old Blockbuster video card lying around, maybe, or something like that, right? An old gym membership, maybe you had a gift card to a coffee place that you're not using anymore. Anything that's like those plastic cards, they're not going to scrape your glass, and you can use them like a razor blade. Usually in an upward motion is best, not necessarily downward, but you kind of put them in, use them at a slight angle and pull up. That'll help scrape algae off your glass without hurting your glass. Because they're a lot softer, that type of plastic. You can also look at getting one of the other things that I like using. I don't have one right now because I beat the heck out of my old one, but there's the softer kind of rubberized putty knives that you can get at like paint supply stores, at some art stores and stuff like that. So sometimes it's a soft plastic that's usually like a yellow color, and sometimes it's a kind of stiff rubberized, or it's like a plastic with a rubberized coating. Those also work really, really well. They're soft enough they're not going to hurt your glass, but they're a good edge and can give you something a bit wider and broad. I don't necessarily use, I do like the MagFloat ones quite a lot for glass itself, but you have to be careful around your silicone with them. but I like them quite a lot. They don't scrape, especially with the little attachment that has the little kind of shovel front on it. I use them on my bigger tanks. That's where I like those the most. On a smaller tank, a lot easier to just get like a sponge in there and dig your arm in. So it depends on the size of the tank you're doing with your water box there. Yeah. Okay, we'll go into like full questions at this point, guys. So if you got anything, at Bentley Pasco makes it super easy for me to see, etc., etc. Julio Brito, hey Bentley, what's a good cheap light? Good question. So it depends on what you're looking for. If you want something with a little bit more control, I would look at either like the Higer or the JCMP. Those are kind of my two go-tos. Excuse me. It's that time of the year when like the weather shifted a bunch. That makes my nose run. Drives me nuts. Anyway, or it's all that other stuff I do, right? The nose candy. Jeez, I'm sorry. My brain is really random today because I've had a heck of a day at work. Those are good if you want a little bit more control, not a ton of control. Similar to like any of the lights where you can click and it goes up stages, right? It's going to be that style. They're pretty good. They're pretty bright. They're not very expensive. If you want something that's a little easier to find in a store, I would look for like a Phoenix Stingray. It's really only on off, but it's pretty good in a majority of tanks. It also depends on the size of your tank. And then beyond that, anything else is going to get a little bit more expensive. In general, though, I will say this. You get what you pay for. So on a cheap light, water splashing on it is a risk that you're just going to lose that light, period. If you dunk it in the tank, it's probably dead. More than likely with most of your cheap lights, after about a year, they are going to start dimming out. And they will start dimming out really hard 2 to 3 years later. A well-built light will not do that. And the difference between spending that like maybe $60 once and say maybe $150 once, it's not actually once. So like if you buy that $60 light once, it's probably only going to last you a year or two. And they're going to need another one. Where if you buy that good light, Fluvols, you don't necessarily have to go that high. But any of your Phoenixes, some of your nicer built lights, they are going to last you a lot longer. If you find something that inherently has a longer warranty, you're naturally protected by that warranty, right? So Fluval's got a pretty good one. I can't remember what Chihiro's is if you go like the super high-end level. And obviously, if you're looking for a cheap light, you're not looking for super high-end. But I would caution you on focusing on the cheapness of the light and think about like, how long are you going to use that light? Do you want a light that you can use for 5 years and it's never going to dim? It's going to keep being awesome. It has some good features. You probably want to spend a little bit more on your light. What is a cheap light? Are you trying to only spend $60? You're limited. Are you looking at more like, I don't want to spend $200, but maybe $120 or so is fine? Then maybe you've got a few more options where you can get some better quality out, right? So that's one thing that I would really pay attention to. It also depends on what country you're in, right? Certain lights are just not available there. Like Eheim has a light in Europe. It's apparently actually pretty decent. Don't have those here, but interesting. Geek boy. I used horned nearite snails as my glass scraper. Hey man, you do you. Desert Fish Keeper. I think people who buy Biohome Ultimate use 10 pounds of it in a canister and put it in a 100-gallon Planet tank with 10 CPDs and say it completes the nitrogen cycle. I have no nitrates. Yeah. I'm inherently suspicious of things that say that like they consume excess nitrates, because to set that up correctly requires some very interesting science and usually a lot more than what a ceramic media is going to bring you. Or like, substrate about this thick in a tank for those other options of filtration out there. I question some of those things. But then again, just show me data that proves it otherwise and I'll shut up. I'll stop questioning. Right? It's one of those. Leo209 have a 20-gallon long with a pair of L181s. Pair of Pisto have an aqua top in it. Wanted to switch to a co-op sponge. Powerhead, is that too much? I mean, probably not. The powerhead doesn't push that much water. It's not huge flow, and especially in a 20 long because of how long it is, you'd probably be fine. It's just picking what you want. Kingfisher's Catch, was that WIO? You'd have to, I think so, but I'd have to see the full name again. It's been a long time since they emailed me pre-pandemic, so it's been a while. I just remember that very specifically. NAP Aquatics sees the Pro Heroes, and it's at 50%. Still have algae. Yeah, I mean, those things have some oomph to them. Braveheart's wondering why you're using a sponge filter in your Flugel Flex. You weren't here for the opening, I see. I was doing a water change, and the pump finally died, right? Because that tank's 6 years old now, and the pump finally died out in it. So I did some stuff to try and see if I could get the pump back to life, and other than I'd probably have to fully disassemble it and do some work on it. So I emergency hooked a sponge filter in there for now, and in, I don't know, like probably 2 weeks or so, I'm going to try and work on it. If I can bring it back to life, I will. Otherwise, I might be buying a replacement pump. Paul Sotero, Corey showed off his new light in his recent video. Functionality looks like it compares to the high-grade JCMP. Yeah, the functionality is relatively similar. I think the build quality is probably a little bit better, just looking at it. I haven't had one in my hands, so I can't be certain. But it kind of is following like the build spec of the Fluval 3.0 plant. But we'll see. We'll see. And to follow that up, Julio, will you be reviewing the co-op LED light? Most likely. I received an email asking me if I wanted to play around with one. So, and I said yes, because otherwise I was probably just going to have to buy one, because frankly, you guys will barrage me if I don't. I've apparently become known as like the light guy, even though I've only done so many lights. But yeah, you know, it looks interesting. At some point, whenever they get them in, I'm going to test one. But yeah, I received an email asking me if I would like to play around with one, and I said yes, I would. So it's nice of them to say to offer me that. Let me see here. So that follows up on, yeah, okay, cool. Okay, I go with there's a question now. Making sure brain, it's kind of scattered. I got told, I'll tell you this, guys, just because you'll understand why my brain is scattered. I got told early today that basically 2 weeks worth of work I did recently, I now have to redo entirely in like 3 days. All because somebody didn't push their code correctly. So even though they told me it was pushed correctly and I was testing it, it wasn't pushed correctly. And so I was not testing their code, even though they thought they were. Fun times. Oh, boy. All right. We need a member emoji with that face you just made. So that was Lady Diane. I put a poll up, and for those of you in chat, if you haven't already, I would sincerely hope that you help me out and go check out the community tab. I put a poll up because I'm thinking about changing some of the channel art on the channel. And I asked like people whether they'd rather have like photos, right? Because like there's the current one where I'm kind of doing this, pointing at myself, being a dorp, which dorp is a mixture of dork and derp that I just made up. I can't English. I don't know why anybody listens to me. But or versus like something semi-cartoony, which I think I might have got to a point where I get to more emotes. So if so, I'll actually have some. I have to go commission some art for some new member stuff. I have to check that. I'm not sure off the top of my head, but yeah, could do one with the that dumb face. There was one other one I wanted to do before Johnny's comment, because I want to answer that too. But there was one about I think it was Bozeman specifically. Where were you? You were asking me like a minimum temperature, and I want to make sure I answer this correctly, as opposed to if it's Bozeman specific versus just rainbows. Dang it! Where did that question go? How did I lose you? Because I also want to give you a little shout out. You know, you asked me a good question. I like it. There it is. Way. Jeez. How did I miss that? What's the minimum temperature to keep bozemanite rainbow fish? Good question. So in general, I would argue that the optimal temperature range is about 74 to 76. You can go higher, yes, and you can go lower. Honestly, I probably wouldn't go below 70, and I would try to go more like 72. It depends on the fish. So if you're looking at more of like the stream fish, so like Aves Creek is probably the most common example. We don't usually get most of the other stream bosemani. There's kind of only two that are well known, which is Chromsa and Aves, and Chromsa is nigh impossible to find. They're also the smallest bosemani, just in case you're curious. Then I would say that you're a little more likely to bring it down some and be okay, because as you have more water movement, the water can be inherently cooler, right? Now, there will be places that will tell you, oh, you can go lower and lower, blah, 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 blah. Stuff like that. But I would say, in general, I would look at like 70 as your low point, preferably more like 72. And maybe, Way, if you want to give me some extra context, or a specific fish you're trying to keep with these bosemani, or is it you're just trying not to run like too many heaters in the tank or something like that? Why do so many websites on the internet say 81 Fahrenheit to 86 Fahrenheit for bosemani? Actually, that's a great question. I think a lot of them get hung up on the fact that when we're raising them fairly young, and they do come from areas that can get fairly hot, we tend to raise them at higher temperatures. But like 86, that bosemani is gonna have a very short lifespan. You're gonna go from a fish that could live as long as a decade, and you're gonna turn it into a fish that only lives 3 years, pumping at that temperature the whole time. Like, it's just, you speed up their metabolism so much. And yeah, most rainbow fish like it kind of in the mid 70s. Mary Beth, wow, YouTube is picky. I have been a member for 1 year, 3 months, and 30 days. But it says 16 months there, so, you know. Yeah, I mean, like Kelly Foreman, who probably knows more about rainbows than I do. I'm just the loudmouth of the rainbow batch. I'm not the most knowledgeable. Kelly keeps hers at 75. I try to target that like 74 to 76 range. I understand temperature's going to swing a little bit depending on like temperature in your house, how much sun you're getting, how you're running your equipment, blah, 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 blah. But in general, I like that 74 to 76 range for almost all of my rainbows. That's what I try to shoot for. But when I'm raising babies, I will crank it higher to try and hatch them. And for the first, I don't know, 3 months or so. I just turned my rainbows up to 78. 76 felt cold. 78's fine. It's not that bad. I just think that in that 74, 76 range, kind of in there, and like, right, 2 degrees is not a huge difference. But in that range, it's just better for their long-term health, and it mitigates some small risks of bacterial infections as you start cranking that temperature up a little bit. My biggest concern is rainbows can be more susceptible to certain bacteria, especially mycobacterium, aka fish tuberculosis. And so if you're going to crank it up that high, that like 81 to 86, can rainbows handle it? Yeah, but you are just flirting with disaster when it comes to helping bacteria, because bacteria likes that warmer temperature, right? Not a fan of that. No, sir. But I'm an idiot, so maybe maybe I'm wrong. Maybe the internet knows better. What do you think? Internet? Oh, man. Robert Johnson. Have you heard Corey's thoughts on his light coming out versus the Fluval 3.0? I felt like he exaggerated how difficult the Fluval light is because it has the option to be complex. Okay, so I was watching that. Was that a live stream or was that a video? That was the video when he was walking around his fish room most recently, right? After showing off getting that rack built and everything. He's talking about lighting in his tanks. Now I remember. I had it on. I was mostly listening to it and not actually watching very much of it while I was walking one of my dogs. And I had a similar feeling. I was kind of like, well, Yeah, it's not that complex. I understand from the perspective of trying to line everything up with something simple like a Wi-Fi timer. Like if you really like those Casa Wi-Fi timers, which I do, and you want to set up something simple, that's the easiest way. But you can adjust something like the Fluval to trigger based on when things turn on with a Casa timer. You just have to know how to do it. And I guess that's where it's a little too complex. If you want something that's just like on, off, get it. And I get where Corey's point is. But for me, like, that complexity is where you actually can do a lot of interesting things. Me personally, I love a ramp up and ramp down. Let me explain why I like that in lights. Because this will probably come into play whenever I review a light that doesn't have this, is that if you have fish that are a little skittish to begin with, when the light just suddenly is on, they freak out. My Leopoldi angelfish freak out if a light suddenly comes on. Some of my rainbows get a little skittish if a light suddenly just comes on. Where if you get that nice little steady ramp up and ramp down, it's more akin to nature. Is it perfectly mimicking nature? No. But it's enough that it, in general, creates less stress on the fish. Now, over time, will those fish get used to, hey, the lights just turn on at a certain time of day? Probably. But for me personally, I tend to like something where I have a ramp up, ramp down, because maybe it's purely a bias in my brain that it's like, that's a little more natural. Big quotation marks around that, right? We're keeping fish in glass boxes with all sorts of equipment to try and mimic nature, right? This is full of plants that none of these fish live around, but it gives me a more natural aquarium. We could criticize that all day long, but for me, the difference between light on, light off, and light on, light off is a little bit easier on my fish. And if I can do things, especially with some of my fish that are a little more skittish, to make it a little easier on them so that they don't randomly freak out and smack into the glass or jump out or whatever, I'm going to do that. Right? So that's one of the things where, like, I love software because software lets me do those things. Corey went for something that is probably more in the lines, and at least from my understanding of what he was saying in that video, he's shooting for less complexity, so there's less potential for failure, right? Because the more complex we make something, the more points of failure we introduce into that product. Whereas the more simplistic product, there's only a couple ways this thing can fail. So we're less likely to run into a problem long term, hopefully, because it's more simplistic. And in that regard, I totally understand that. If you're trying to build a product where you have a no question warranty and you want it to last a while, simplicity is going to make it easier to minimize the risk of something going wrong with that product. Very, very complex products, more likely to run into issues because if one part breaks down, it can affect everything, right? So that's where I can understand the, like, let's not be so complex. Amazon Research Center for ornamental fishes. Dr. Maz, good to see you. Good to see you. But, you know, it's stuff like that I think about. The difference between skittish and skittish is how scared the subjects become. Wordplay. Wordplay is fun. Wordplay is fun. But I hope that makes sense. Like we're minimizing some of the complexity in theory to make the light have better longevity. I'm not sure. Is that supposed to be phoenix fish? I'm not sure how you want that pronounced, but you know, let me know in chat. Either way, you can't beat the 150 price point. I think what 150 is the 4-foot light, right? Which I think 150 current day is a pretty good price point. But keep in mind, like, if you're comparing that direct to a Fluval, the Fluval has a number of features, added on to it that make the difference in that price point? So there's those kind of questions. Okay. Also, Johnny asked me about this. We were talking Bozeman either. Yeah, it's Phoenix. Okay, cool. Kind of thought so, but I don't want to be wrong. I had a friend who like recently moved to the Phoenix area, so I did not know. This is a random tangent. I'm getting back to Johnny's question. This is a random tangent. I did not know that they had like a canal system in Phoenix to basically manufacture like riverfront property for houses. I think that's awesome. It's like crazy and cool all at the same time. And not the what is the drinking water system, right? There are like canals specifically that you're allowed to like boat in and things like that. It's like so cool. Friend sent me pictures walking down one of them when he's walking his dog. It's like, check this out. You could live waterfront in the desert. I was like, that's interesting. Okay, now Johnny, what is my favorite Bozeman collection point? Ooh, good question. I would probably have to say, currently, that's a Tinjo. Now, Uter is really close. I can't say Chromesa because I've never owned Chromesa. I also can't say Aves Creek because I've never had Aves Creek in hand. However, based on what I've seen pictures of for my friends, it's probably going to turn into Aves Creek because I just really like the coloration that fish gets. Little hints of yellow, but that deep, dark, reddish orange. And that blue up front where it's kind of like almost like a mini Uter, but not quite as red and not quite as like almost black up front. Just a really good looking fish. Plus they stay a little bit smaller, right? The Atinjos get some chunk to them. There's some big boys. So I feel like any Bozeman, it's really hard to go wrong if it's a good strain. Like the old like raised in the farms for an eternity, like where the males are basically yellow, like those aren't quite so great. But yeah. Wait, I see some Asian YouTube videos that have some rainbow fish that have extremely short bodies. What are those things? So that's actually a genetic deformity that they have been selectively breeding for that is similar to like balloon mollies. And I hate it because it really negatively impacts all sorts of health in those fish. But yeah, you'll see them kind of short and chunky. It's the same. Basically trying to cause the same genetic deformities that cause balloon mollies and some of like the teacup platies. Which sucks. It really sucks. M&C Aquatics, what's the rarest rainbow? And Ryan, I'm getting your question next. I promise. That's an interesting question. Technically, it is probably the Clausioensis. Or there are a few fish that came out of Papua New Guinea, so the side where a lot of like the fighting happens, and we just don't have very many of them in the hobby. But in the case of the Clausioensis, they were basically collected in a ditch nearby their natural habitat because there were none in this like small. It only runs for like 150 feet, I think, where the water system is actually up at the surface. Otherwise, the rest of the water system that is where the Clausio is all subterranean. It's underground. So think kind of like the Devil's Hole pupfish, where there's a small area that actually goes up and meets the surface where those rainbows came from. And at this point, we're pretty confident they're extinct in the wild. And because they're a significantly smaller area than something like, say, the Centoniensis or Wanamensis, they're very, very rare. The other one that's probably like the rare one, especially in the United States, as Mike Stambaugh is kind of alluding to, is the Glossolepis maculosus. That's known as the spotted rainbow, so it's kind of yellow with black spots dead along the single. And Kelly actually probably has a better point, is there's a number of species that have probably been extinct before we had an opportunity to get them. And it's so hard. You know, there's a lot of rainbows, honestly, that are very rare because their habitats have been destroyed. You know, we're very fortunate that like the Running River rainbow, which is one of my favorites, was saved because it was going to hybridize out had those scientists not just randomly stumbled and done some collections and observations there, right? And we were running into the same thing with what was formerly called the Malonda Gold. I think now it's the, what is it, Wallace Creek? Or at least, maybe it's Williams Creek, but the Wallace Road is the ones that I had for a little while. But you run into a number that this is a problem with rainbows, is so many of the areas are being destroyed because they're putting up like palm oil plantations and stuff like that, or there's like illegal, not the greatest like gold mining that's going on, and the chemicals that come in are just murdering all the fish. So yeah, Williams Creek. Thank you, Lady Diane. Thank you. And my running rivers are doing great. Honestly, they have phenomenal color. I'm probably going to give a male or two to a friend of mine who has a big group but only has like one male. He's got a lot of females to help him breed them out. I actually have to get in touch with him to see before it starts getting too cold, like when he's available for me to deliver him a random rainbow fish out of my tank. But yeah, mine are doing pretty good. I love that fish a lot. I love the running river. But yeah, I mean, there's a ton of rainbows like that. So let's go back to that other question real fast, Mr. Ryan. Are current USA Freshwater Plus fixtures good lights? I mean, yes, in general, they're pretty good. I have to remind myself which one the that one is. I have to remember, because there's a feature set between a couple of different currents. There we go. Not the satellite. Or is it the Satellite Plus? You are talking the Satellite Plus, right? Because that's the only one I remember off of. Let me see if because otherwise there's like the Serene Sun. So yeah, the Satellite Plus. Here's my thing with that light. I think they're okay. I don't think they're like the best, because they've been the same model for a number of years and they really haven't innovated them at all. They're still like an old remote. So I would say they're on par with some of the similar, like the original like Phoenix lights, right? And Phoenix is a decent light. Is it like top tier? No. But I would say it's a good kind of middle of the road light. You're saving some money on them. They're not super expensive. They used to be crazy expensive. You used to pay like $200 for a current, and it was like nowhere near as good as lights that were half that price. But their pricing has become a little bit more affordable. The thing I would look at is like, look at all the other lights in that price range. And if you start getting close to something like a Fluval, you're probably paying too much, because Fluval has so many features. It's so well built. But if you're paying like half as much as a Fluval to get the right size, then you're probably about where that current should be in its value, if that makes sense. Do I think they're the best lights out there? No. I've seen a lot of people have issues because current tends to push a lot of blue and isn't necessarily super controllable. Hopefully they've made them more controllable than they used to be. But I used to see lots of reports of people like having way too much blue with a current light and getting extra algae because of it. So just keep those things in mind. Look at a lot of options. There's a lot of options nowadays for aquarium lights. That's probably the best part about aquarium lighting, is it's come a long way. And don't be afraid to like look at something like Phoenix or like JCB, Higer. Like if you're trying to save a few bucks, those aren't bad lights. But if you like the specific control and what you're getting with the current, and the price seems right, then you're okay. MNC Aquatics have an old ADA light. Grows plant's really good, but it's only on or off. Wish it had a dim feature. Was that one of the bulb ones, though? That'd be my question. Passion fruit. Difference between RU2 and RU4 strain of Gertrude. Well, if you wanted to go like really hyper crazy, technically none of them are a true Gertrude. They basically are. There's just small differences in the genetics. Minimal. I think if I remember right, it's a slight difference in some of the pectoral fin color. I don't do a ton of the pseudomagills, so getting that deep on pseudos is where you start getting to the extent of my pseudomagill knowledge. Because I like the big boys. I'm a big boy. I like the big boys. What do you want from me? Leo 209 Aquatics. Bentley. Running River versus Aves Creek. Ooh. Running River. Yeah. Bozeman got me into the hobby, but if I had to choose between those two, I would have to get Running Rivers. And let me explain the reason why. I like the Aves Creek a lot. I think they're very pretty fish. And I think if you want a Bozeman eye, Aves Creek is one of the best options you can get right now because they've become pretty prolific. However, for the thank you, Kelly. Boom. For the Running Rivers, they have the best story. Yeah, Blake's Aquatics is right there. Hey, buddy, good to see you. My good Aussie rainbow buddy right there. They have the best story. And also, if you watch their behavior, they school super tight. Like, they school like Rummy Nose Tetras school. None of the Bozeman eye do that. None of the Bozeman eye stick that close to each other. Running Rivers will, and that's what makes them phenomenal to watch because their behavior is so much different than a lot of the other rainbows that we get out there. They are a very tight schooler, and that makes them very enjoyable. Because you'll see them, like, you very rarely see infighting between the males or anything, and they're just cruising around in formation, like fighter pilots, man. It's awesome. Awesome. Sorry, Kelly had Leo. That's like asking whether cake or ice cream is better. Why choose? That's fair, but I'll play that game. I'll play Sophie's Choice all day long. I'll play it. Wait, my wife thinks that dojo loaches are food and that all cichlids are tilapia. Well, I mean, in certain cultures that is 100% accurate, right? When my lady heard about that like they eat dojo loaches, she got this like huge like sad puppy eyes. Was like, we have to go save them. I was like, oh no, no, you're not supposed to hear these things. But she watches my videos, so eventually she finds out. Oh man. Which, by the way, Blake, since you're here, I like secretly stalked a while back your Etsy page, and I like some of the 3D printing stuff you're doing, dude. I like it a lot. I have to order some eventually. But yeah. Just casual thing there. Man, it's already like almost 7 p.m.'s my time. Jesus, where does the time go? Streams go so fast. I want to make sure I didn't miss any good questions here. Oh, there was a comment when we were talking about, Mike had this in chat, but I want to bring this up. Find high-quality Bozeman eye, and the females even have a lot of blue to them, which is 100% true. Or at least good females will still have good color. They just have a more muted, kind of metallic color instead of that bright color, right? An example would be like the Atinjos that I had for a long while. The females were like orange. They were like this color, a little bit brighter than this. And it was kind of muted, but they looked like cheap, like the males you'd find at a Petco, right? They looked better than the males you'd find at a Petco, and they were females. So if you find a good quality strain, which it's very easy to do, Dancefish helps. But there's a number of places now that are getting significantly better rainbow strains when it comes to your stores. There's lots of breeders that sell online, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? Even the females look good. Desert Fish Keeper also had a great comment that I want to go, that I kind of forgot, but I'm sorry, but I want to go this way. So in regards to the aquarium co-op light, and in the video that Corey was talking about it, is Corey's kind of trying to give people a paint by numbers way to keep a planet tank. Not saying it's better or worse, just that's kind of what he's trying to do. And I can agree with that analogy, right? Is he's got that whole like, oh, I've got my tank and I'm doing this, and it's like 2 clicks versus 3 clicks, right? Totally get that. It simplifies things. It makes it easier for people to start kind of digging in. And I do like that. But, you know, until I got my hands on it, I can't really say too much beyond that, right? Can't say too much. Paul Soltero, I'm using a 4-foot Stingray 2.0 on a Wi-Fi timer and a 4-foot Fluval Skakwas guy running a program on a 120. Good life for plant growth, and the discus look good too. Nice. Nice, nice, nice. I haven't messed with the Stingray 2s. I like the color that you get out of the original Stingray a little bit better. Omar, I still want some of the red Bozeman. Any idea where I can find them? Dan or Gary? You're probably better with Gary, because at that point you need ooters. And Dan doesn't have a breeder that's giving ooters to him. He's getting Aves Creek and I think a Tinjo's. Ooters are tough to find right now, honestly. One of the best people that used to be out there was a gentleman in California named Larry Schenkel, but he's had some health stuff go on, so he's kind of like not actively breeding any of his fish right now. I do know a guy that's up here in Washington that has the ooters, who's been breeding them a bunch, and he's like said very nicely that he will give me many, many fish. Imperial Tropicals have ooter right now. I do know that Tropicals has gotten some stuff. I have to look that up specifically because, you know, I like the guys at Imperial Tropicals. I like what they're doing. Plus, they've been working with guys like Gary to get better lines. And if they've got ooters in stock, man. They have some Aves Creek. Come on. I'm not seeing ooters. Are they buried in here? Well, they have Classio. No, they're out of stock. They have Atinjos that are out of stock, but they had Classio instances at one point. And they have the Blue Hole Rainbow, which is also kind of a cool little rainbow. I don't see the ooter as an in-stock bow at Imperial. Are they just not on the website yet? Is that what it is? Like they're breeding them but don't have them on the website yet? Because that I would understand. They're on the website. Why am I not seeing them? Because I see like the Aves Creek on their website. And then I see just like, you know, Melanitania bozemanii kind of basic. Well, what if I just like search ooter? Aha! Oh, they just have like a really bad bad picture. They're pictures of babies. They only have 4 in stock though. You go, Omar. I'll give you a direct link. You can get the last 4. Omar, I'll talk to my buddy and see if he's willing to ship fish or eggs. He might be able to. And if so, I'll see if I can put you in touch with him. Oh, okay. Search up Atinjos. Cool. Quick, someone buy them. Let's give Imperial Tropicals some money. Quick, someone buy them. Oh, man. But yeah, that would be your best bet. I need to find somebody who's got the freaking Chromsas in the United States. Those things have been impossible to find. I could probably get them imported from the Germanys. But oi, that's a lot of work. That's a lot of work. Have to ship them to other people's houses. Whew. But yeah, anyway. Wow, gang, we are at time. So be here next week. Yes, next week. Just trying to make sure, because like next week would be the second Tuesday of the month, and I had to make sure my club didn't have a meeting. But this is the month where we do our big auction instead of a meeting, and that happens on a Saturday. So no interruptions in our streaming schedule this month or next month, because next month is our holiday party. Although I think they might do that on a Tuesday, which I think is dumb. But yeah. Leo209, best source for black rams right now. Well, I mean, best source might not be one you can get them from. And I can just go get them from Dean. I'm not sure off the top of my head. I would have to like look. There's a couple different places, I think, on like Get Gills that sell them. I just don't know, like, off the top of my head who. Get Gills might be one of your better ones. I'll ask at the auction on Sunday. Thanks, Lady Diane. Oh, you guys have an auction Sunday? Oh, I'm jealous. Anyway, gang, we'll be back next week. Got a video coming out this Saturday. Don't forget, if you haven't watched the last two videos and you want a chance to win one of these sweet Danger Noodle towels, go watch those videos and comment appropriately, and you'll be entered to win. I'll be drawing that this Saturday. I'll contact you in comments, all that kind of stuff, usual stuff, right? Anyway, gang, thank you so much for being here. Always be skeptical of people who give positive reviews of products they sell, and stay awesome. Bye-bye now.